Deep within the history of medieval India lies a legend as ancient as it is terrifying. The tragic story of Gonga Rani, a princess whose disobedience to her father, the king, cost her not only her life, but also the chance to rest in peace. Her name, which means Queen of the East in Sanskrit, still echoes through remote villages and forgotten temples as a haunting tale of tragedy, curse, and vengeful spirit. The story begins more than 1,000 years ago, during the reign of the Paramara dynasty, in what is now Madhya Pradesh, in central India. King Udayaditya was known for his wisdom, but also for his severity. Gonga Rani, his only daughter, was admired for her beauty, intelligence, and indomitable spirit. From a young age, she showed an inclination toward the art of war, strategy, and astrological sciences, something rare for a woman of her time. But it was precisely her independence that sealed her fate. One night, during a lunar festival in honor of Shiva, Gonga Rani committed an act considered treason by the standards of the royal court. She disobeyed a direct order from her father not to leave the palace during the sacred ceremony. According to local chronicles, she had received a prophetic dream. A whispering voice warned her that if she remained within the castle walls that night, her soul would be trapped forever. Convinced that the message was divine, she escaped disguised as a maid to seek answers from the hermits in the nearby forest. When the king discovered her absence, he flew into a rage. It wasn't so much the broken protocol that angered him, but the implied message. His royal authority had been publicly defied by his own blood. To send a powerful message to the court and the entire kingdom, he ordered an exemplary punishment. She was to be buried alive in a sealed underground tomb, with no food or water, in the hope that her slow death would purify her offense. The punishment was carried out in secret, in a hidden cave deep within the forests of Bhopal. It is said that before being buried, Gonga Rani cast a curse from the shadows. May my blood cry for justice through generations. May whoever sleeps above my tomb feel my pain every night. May my name be whispered in fear and respect. From that day on, strange sightings were reported in the area. Dancing lights, the cries of a woman in the dark, and shadowy figures vanishing among the trees. Peasants began to avoid the area, calling it Rani Ki Deri, which translates to the Queen's Mound. Years later, when a group of archaeologists attempted to excavate the site, they found evidence of a complex underground structure, along with accounts from workers who abandoned the project after experiencing unexplainable phenomena. Tools breaking on their own, animals fleeing in terror, and recurring dreams of a woman dressed in white begging to be freed. Today, the legend of Gonga Rani remains alive not only in neighboring villages, but also in folk songs, stage plays, and even Indian horror films. Some believe her spirit still roams the forest, seeking redemption or vengeance. Others say her story is a moral fable about power, disobedience, and the cost of freedom. But there is one thing everyone agrees on. No one has slept peacefully near the place where she was buried. The figure of Gonga Rani has remained alive not only through oral tradition and supernatural legends, but also due to certain historical clues suggesting that her story may have a real foundation. Although few official records from the period mention the princess directly, historians and researchers have found scattered fragments in ancient manuscripts, inscriptions in forgotten temples, and local chronicles that, when pieced together, paint a surprisingly coherent portrait of an extraordinary woman and a cruel fate. During the 11th century, the Paramara kingdom was one of the most powerful in northern India, with its capital in Mandu, a place famous for its majestic architecture and strategic military location. King Udayaditya, Gonga Rani's father, ruled between the years 1059 and 1069 CE, according to records such as the Bhojpur inscription, although some sources place him in slightly different periods. What is clear is that the kingdom was mired in constant internal and external conflicts, invasions, rebellions, and a court full of political intrigue where every decision could mean glory or downfall. According to indirect accounts, Gonga Rani was no ordinary princess. It is said that she was educated alongside male princes in military strategy, philosophy, and astronomy. Some apocryphal texts describe her as a close advisor to her father, capable of interpreting celestial omens and predicting times of war or drought. This granted her a certain symbolic power within the kingdom, but also stirred distrust among traditional courtiers and priests, who viewed with suspicion the growing influence of a woman in matters considered the exclusive domain of men. Her interest in forbidden knowledge, according to some accounts, even led her to travel in disguise to study with hermits and ascetic masters in sacred forests. There, she learned ancient rituals, advanced meditation techniques, and perhaps something more: the art of seeing beyond the veil of the visible. Some versions claim she possessed the gift of clairvoyance, and that it was precisely this that allowed her to have a premonitory vision before that fateful lunar festival. That night, when she decided to flee the palace, it was not out of rebellion or romance, as some modern versions try to simplify it, but for a much deeper reason. She had seen in dreams the collapse of the kingdom if she remained inside during that ceremony. For her, it was a matter of life or death, not just personally, but nationally. But to King Udayaditya, already weary of her constant defiance of tradition, it seemed like pure and simple treason. The punishment of being buried alive was chosen with a double intent, as a form of ritual purification and as a warning. In ancient India, there were extreme funerary practices reserved for high-ranking criminals or royal blood traitors. They weren't always immediate executions. Sometimes they were slow deaths, where the body was left to perish while specific rituals were performed. Gonga Rani's tomb would have been built underground, with sealed chambers and labyrinthine corridors, more of a ceremonial structure than a mere hole. Curiously, some temples near Mandu have carvings depicting a chained female figure between two columns, gazing toward the sky and surrounded by astrological symbols. Researchers from the Archaeological Survey of India, ASI, have suggested these may be symbolic tributes to figures like Gonga Rani, powerful women whose legacies were officially erased, but who persisted in popular imagination. Moreover, there are even more intriguing findings. In several excavations near Bhopal, human bones belonging to a young woman have been discovered, along with remnants of gold jewelry and precious stones, and a copper plate with a cryptic message that has not yet been fully deciphered. Some experts believe this may be evidence of her actual existence. But perhaps the most shocking thing is this. In the region of Malwa, where these events are believed to have taken place, there still exists an ancestral custom. No one plants trees or cultivates land near certain circular ruins locally known as Rani Ka Kera, or the Queen's Place. The elders insist that doing so may awaken her, and that those who try never sleep peacefully again. Over the centuries, the story of Gonga Rani ceased to be merely a tragic historical episode and became a living legend. Her figure became deeply embedded in Hindu folklore and the local traditions of Madhya Pradesh, where her name began to be associated not only with betrayal and punishment, but also with curses, vengeance, and a restless spirit that never found peace. According to the most widespread accounts, from the moment she was buried alive, Gonga Rani's soul became trapped between two worlds, neither fully in the realm of the living nor released into the afterlife. This duality is central to many Hindu beliefs, where the soul's post-death state depends on specific rituals, and when these are not fulfilled, as in her case, the spirit can remain anchored to this plane, condemned to wander in search of peace or justice. The earliest reports of supernatural phenomena around her tomb date back to just a few years after her death. It is said that during full moon nights, female cries could be heard coming from the forest, along with the sound of chains dragging across the ground. Nearby villagers claim to have seen a figure dressed in royal clothing, walking among the trees as if searching for something or someone. One of the most famous stories comes from the 17th century, when a group of woodcutters decided to camp near what is now known as Rani ki Deri. One of them, it is said, mocked the legend, claiming it was nothing but peasant superstition. That night, while they slept, one of his companions awoke to hear an ancient chant, like a forgotten mantra. When he opened his eyes, he saw a woman with long white hair and completely black eyes staring directly at him. The man tried to scream, but he couldn't move. The figure leaned in and whispered, "Will you disobey too?" The next day, the woodcutter was found dead, his face frozen in an expression of terror. No one ever discovered what had killed him. These types of stories have repeated themselves over the centuries. In some versions, Gonga Rani appears as a protector of women who have been unjustly treated, appearing in dreams to warn them of danger or help them escape abusive situations. In others, she acts as a vengeful spirit, punishing those who dare desecrate her resting place or misuse her name. During the British colonial period, even official records mention strange incidents near certain ruins in Malwa. A report from 1862, signed by a local officer, details how a group of workers hired to build a road near Mandu abandoned the site after reporting inexplicable phenomena: tools disappearing, animals frightened without apparent cause, and recurring dreams of a princess pleading for help. Another curious fact is that on several occasions, people who attempted to dig or build on land near the supposed tomb of Gonga Rani ended up facing personal tragedies, sudden illnesses, deadly work accidents, or irreparable family conflicts. This caused such fear among workers that some projects were cancelled before they even began. In the cultural realm, Gonga Rani's influence reached art and popular literature. During the 19th century, regional poets wrote verses about the cursed princess, and in the 20th century, her story inspired theatrical plays and ghost films. One of the most well-known is Rat Ke Shaitan, The Demon of the Night, released in 1984, loosely based on her life and death, and it caused a sensation throughout northern India. Today, many communities still remember Gonga Rani as a kind of Indian Lady Macbeth, a powerful woman who paid the ultimate price for defying the established order. But there are also those who see her as a tragic heroine, a victim of a patriarchal system that couldn't tolerate intelligent, independent, and different women. And although time has passed, her legacy remains alive. In some villages, it is said that if a young woman dreams clearly of a princess dressed in white, it is a sign that she must make an important decision in her life. Many take it as a warning, others as a blessing. But everyone agrees on one thing: if you hear her voice in a dream, you must not ignore it. The story of Gonga Rani, though deeply rooted in Indian culture, is not unique in Asia. Across the continent and throughout the centuries, similar legends have been recorded about powerful women who were buried alive for defying the established order, whether for political, religious, or supernatural reasons. These stories, although different in context, share profound symbolic elements: extreme punishment as a form of social control, the rebellious female figure, and the vengeful or protective spirit that persists beyond death. One of the most fascinating comparisons is found in China with the legend of Lady Bai, a sorceress from the Song period, 960 to 1279 AD, who, according to legend, was buried alive out of fear of her magical powers. Like Gonga Rani, Lady Bai was known for her intelligence and her ability to read the skies, but also for defying traditional norms. It is said that before her death, she cursed the village where she was executed, and ever since, each generation reports strange phenomena: children speaking in ancient tongues, flowers that bloom only at night, and shadows walking alone across the fields. In Japan, we find a parallel myth in the figure of Oyuki, a female samurai who broke the rules by leading a revolt against a corrupt feudal lord. Captured after a lost battle, she was buried up to her neck on a hill near Kyoto, left at the mercy of the sun and rain. Before dying, she swore that if any woman attempted to follow her warrior path, she would either grant her strength or destroy her. Today, it is said that near that hill, called Hakone no Yureizuka, the Hill of Ghosts, combat training screams can still be heard during foggy nights. In Southeast Asia, specifically in Cambodia, there is a very ancient legend about the Naga Queen, a semi-divine ruler who was betrayed by her own council for insisting on building temples dedicated to sacred serpents, something considered heresy by Orthodox priests. She was buried beneath one of the temples she helped design, and it is said that since then, no one can touch the Naga statues without feeling an inexplicable chill, or even falling ill a few days later. There are also parallels in the Middle East, particularly in Iran, where the story is told of Yazdegerd's daughter, a Persian princess who was buried alive for refusing to marry a foreign general during the Arab invasion of the 7th century. Her tomb is believed to be in Shiraz, and although there is no conclusive archaeological evidence, many visitors report sensing a calm but firm female presence, as if watching over those seeking justice or personal freedom. What is striking about all these stories is that, regardless of time or place, women who were buried alive often become legendary figures of great symbolic power, whether as guardians, avengers, or warnings. In many cultures, being buried alive is seen not just as a cruel death, but as an act that violently detaches the soul from the body, preventing its natural passage to the other world. This might explain why so many of these figures appear in tales as trapped, wandering spirits, or spirits with an unfinished purpose. Moreover, these legends tend to emerge during times of social upheaval or political conflict, where the control of women was a tool of domination. That's why the stories of women buried alive can also be read as metaphors of oppression and resistance, where physical death does not mean the end, but the beginning of a new form of existence, that of myth, collective memory, and invisible influence over new generations. This connects directly with the story of Gonga Rani, who, like her Asian counterparts, not only represents a personal tragedy, but also an implicit critique of the power structures that silenced strong and different women. Her legacy, as we will see in the following pages, remains relevant not only in folklore, but also in contemporary movements of female empowerment. Throughout the centuries, the story of Gonga Rani has transcended the pages of ancient manuscripts and the tales told around the fire to become a central figure in modern popular culture. Her legacy not only remains alive in local folklore, but has also been reinterpreted and reinvented in films, historical novels, television series, video games, and even regional celebrations held in her honor each year. One of the earliest major efforts to bring her story to the screen was the Indian film Raat Ki Rani, The Night Queen, released in 1968. Although it leaned more toward romance than history, the film portrayed Gonga Rani as a tragic heroine whose spirit wanders the forest in search of redemption. The soundtrack, composed by R.D. Burman, included songs that became classics, especially Sone Ki Chhatri, The Golden Roof, a ballad symbolizing her shattered dreams and longing for freedom. In the following decades, her story has been revisited on multiple occasions. One of the most impactful versions was the television series Parampara, produced by Doordarshan in the 1990s, which dedicated an entire arc to the Paramara dynasty and the crucial role Gonga Rani played in the royal court. This series helped rekindle academic interest in her figure, leading to new historical studies and research. By the 21st century, her image has evolved into a more empowering and less victimized one. In the 2014 Hindi horror film Nazar Ke Par, Gonga Rani appears as a vengeful spirit who protects abused women, punishing those who commit acts of gender-based violence. Her portrayal is no longer just that of a victim of the past, but also a protective force that inspires justice in the present. Beyond cinema, contemporary literature has embraced her story from multiple angles. Novelists such as Amish Tripathi and Ashwin Sanghi have made veiled references to characters resembling Gonga Rani in their works, blending fiction and myth to explore themes of female power, betrayal, and destiny. Even historical fiction authors like Devika Rangachari have written about female figures in similar contexts, indirectly drawing inspiration from her legacy. A curious phenomenon is the appearance of Gonga Rani in Indian indie video games, many of which incorporate elements of folklore to create immersive narratives. A notable example is Myth of Mandu, an adventure game released in 2020, where the player takes on the role of an investigator, uncovering the hidden secrets behind Gonga Rani's tomb. The game blends historical elements with the supernatural, allowing the player to interact with visions from the past and face moral choices that affect the fate of the princess's soul. But perhaps one of the most fascinating aspects of her cultural influence is her presence in local festivals. Each year, in certain villages near Mandu, a ceremony known as Rani di Rat, the Night of the Queen, is held, typically during the full moon of February. During this event, candles are lit in her honor, old ballads about her life are sung, and traditional dances reenact her escape from the palace, her burial, and her supposed spiritual liberation. What's interesting is that this celebration aims not only to remember her, but also to honor her as a symbol of female resistance. Young women actively participate in these ceremonies, often wearing dresses inspired by her style, or even performing her role in improvised theatrical acts. For them, Gonga Rani is not just a figure of the past, but an inspiration for today. A woman who dared to defy the system, despite the cost. This modern reinterpretation is also reflected on social media, where digital communities of history and mystery enthusiasts share memes, illustrations, and stories about Gonga Rani, often comparing her to contemporary heroines or international figures like the Lady of Shalott or even Medea from Greek mythology. With all this, it's clear that Gonga Rani's story not only endures, it evolves. No longer just a scary legend whispered beneath the shadows of ancient temples. She now lives on in screens, books, games, and in the collective memory of those who see her as a voice still crying out for justice. Beyond her presence in folklore and popular culture, the story of Gonga Rani has taken on new meaning in recent years. She has become a symbolic figure of female empowerment, especially in regions of India where the struggles for equality, personal freedom, and historical recognition of women have gained momentum. Her legacy, once associated solely with tragedy and fear, is now being reinterpreted as a powerful metaphor for resistance against patriarchal oppression, social control, and the silencing of dissenting voices. In rural communities of Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and Uttar Pradesh, where the oral tradition surrounding Gonga Rani still persists, feminist activists and educators have begun using her story as a pedagogical tool. In community workshops and local schools, her actions are recounted not as punished disobedience, but as an act of bravery in the face of a system that sought to silence her. For many young women, Gonga Rani represents what happens when power tries to erase female autonomy, and how, despite that, the memory of those women survives. A notable example is the Ranis of Today movement, launched in 2018 by a group of activists in Bhopal. This project aims to shed light on the stories of historical women who have been ignored or demonized by traditional narratives, among them, of course, Gonga Rani. Through social media campaigns, urban murals, and cultural events, the women involved in the movement are redefining her image, no longer as a tragic princess or vengeful spirit, but as a pioneer of female independence. In this context, her being buried alive is interpreted as an extreme form of censorship. She was not only punished for thinking differently, but was also denied the final word, the chance to defend or explain herself. That idea deeply resonates with the experiences of many women in contemporary India, where cases of gender violence, forced marriages, workplace discrimination, and political silencing remain common. Some Indian feminist writers, such as Namita Gokhale and Ani Zaidi, have made explicit references to figures like Gonga Rani in their essays and novels, highlighting how power structures have always used fear and superstition to justify control over women. In one of her most well-known articles, Zaidi wrote, "How many Gonga Ranis have been erased from history? How many were silenced underground, literally or symbolically, for daring to think differently?" Even in academia, her figure has been the subject of modern anthropological and sociological analysis. Professors at universities like Jawaharlal Nehru University, JNU, and Aligarh Muslim University, AMU, have included her story in courses on comparative mythology, gender studies, and cultural resistance. These analyses emphasize how the demonization of powerful female figures is not unique to India, but part of a global pattern that spans religions, civilizations, and eras. In contemporary art as well, Gonga Rani is increasingly emerging as a symbol of identity and resistance. Artists such as Shilpa Gupta and Nikhil Afali have created installations and illustrations inspired by her story, often blending historical elements with current political messages. One of the most striking works is Voice Under Stone, an interactive exhibition where visitors can hear recordings of female voices representing the silenced voices of history. Among them, that of Gonga Rani. Today, for many young women in India, Gonga Rani is not just a legend. She is both a warning and an inspiration. A warning of what can happen when power feels threatened by female intelligence and determination. And at the same time, an inspiration that, even if you are buried alive, your name can survive if someone chooses to tell your story. Although centuries have passed and the dust of time has covered much of Gonga Rani's real history, her legacy still lives on in stone, earth, and memory. Today, several places in Madhya Pradesh are associated with her, and although there is no officially verified tomb that can be archaeologically confirmed as hers, there are certain sites that, according to local tradition, mark the place where she was buried alive. The most famous is Rani Ki Dairy, located near Bhopal, a mound that many believe hides an underground structure or even an ancient burial chamber. Despite several excavation attempts over the years, no team has been able to fully explore it due to unstable ground conditions and numerous reports of unexplained phenomena. Local workers have reported feeling chills when approaching it, and some research teams have recorded strange sounds at the site, although without definitive scientific confirmation. Another key location is Mandu, formerly known as Mandavgad, an ancient fortress that was the heart of the Paramara kingdom during Udayaditya's reign. The site still contains ruins of palaces, temples, and water systems dating back to the period when Gonga Rani is believed to have lived. Some of these structures bear inscriptions mentioning a warrior princess, although her exact name does not appear. This has led to speculation that it could have been her, or at the very least, that women like her did exist. One curious fact is that in several villages near these historical sites, there is still a tradition of not building on certain circular plots of land, locally called Rani Ka Kera, which roughly translates as the Queen's Garden. Elders in the area claim that doing so may awaken her, and many avoid spending the night there for fear of encountering her spirit. In addition to physical sites, there are also objects associated with her story, though none are conclusive. Among them, ancient jewelry found in excavations near Mandu, similar to what noble women of the time are believed to have worn. Temple carvings depicting chained female figures or surrounded by astrological symbols, interpreted by some as symbolic representations of Gonga Rani. a copper plaque discovered in the 1990s, with a partially legible text mentioning a royal-blooded woman who was silenced for her truth. While it cannot be directly linked to her, many independent researchers consider it a veiled historical reference. Today, her story continues to inspire new generations, not only in India, but also among Hindu communities abroad. In online forums, social media, and educational platforms, many young women read her story and share it as an example of courage in the face of authoritarianism. For them, Gonga Rani is not just a legend. She is a reminder that power fears those who think differently, and that is precisely why we must dare to think. To conclude, Gonga Rani is much more than a princess buried alive. She is a myth that transcends the supernatural to become a story of resistance, a struggle against patriarchal control, a tale of collective memory, and of how a silenced voice can, over time, turn into a cry that echoes across centuries.